next session of Emerge is open for registration, October 29th through December 22nd. If you are interested in investigating the layers of self, but doing so in community, this is a very potent, intensive, compassionate investigation. And it's my favorite offering. Yeah, take a peek.
Wanting to share a little bit about denial. My denial is more flexible than my hamstrings. It's been with me for a long time. And just first of all, denial is natural and it's really helpful. It's a helpful short-term strategy for when we can't deal with how we feel. We find ways to mitigate it until we can process it. This is best case scenario. But often we don't ever get to that processing piece. Before we get there, we do this behavior of the mitigation, of moving around, of easing, finding ways to ease the pain that we're trying to get away from, rather than ever getting around to the process. It's a shock absorber. We're wired with it, and thankfully we are. Even like on like a biological level, if you have like severe pain, your body will kind of like shut down. You can kind of like disassociate, something like that, until you can, your body can deal with it. Again, shock absorption, which is just for the moment, just for a little bit. I have a long history of denial, especially big denial in my addiction. And I still see how in so many subtle ways, the way that it plays out all the time around other things. We all do it. When we think about denial, my association with denial is like complete, like this kind of more on the dramatic end of like this complete refusal to see reality, which I've so been there. But it does play out in many different ways. So we're all on this spectrum somewhere. So you too. But looking at it through my personal experience with addiction is that I was refusing to see, like addiction requires denial to survive, actually. Because we are harming ourselves in an addiction. We are harming ourselves, and we are really refusing to see the trail of chaos that is behind us, or the resources if they are available to us. I was really in this bubble of like, I'm fine. Who else has that mantra of I'm fine? Addiction or not. So many times we say we're fine when we're not. That's a form of denial. Of not being able to admit not only to other people, but to ourselves that things don't feel okay. I am sad, I'm in grief, I'm angry. There's a lot of anger suppression. So we all have different flavors of it. So here's a good question. What's the feeling you're most unwilling to feel? For me, it's probably somewhere on the sadness spectrum. I'm much more prone towards this anger. It feels like a more powerful emotion, like it puts me more in charge, I have something to do, rather than this actually I'm scared, or actually I'm sad, it'll be different for all of us, but that's an example for me. But that is a form of denying emotion. That my sadness or my unworthiness or my not good enough wraps itself up in anger. So I don't have to feel it, because anger is more palatable to me. But under anger, normally we're going to find these more vulnerable emotions. That's another form of denial here. Another good inquiry is what emotions were not allowed in your family. Some of us have family that were very expressive and rageful, yet maybe they didn't talk about feelings. Nobody ever yelled. There was never a problem. Everything was smiles. You know, it's a different form. So it's also what is modeled to us. It's very interesting. Anyway, wrapping back to my own experience with denial and my addiction is that I refused to admit that I had a problem. Everybody around me knew. I'm like slowly killing myself. It wasn't very not obvious to those who were close to me. I was pretty good at hiding it to those who I was just around, more acquaintance-wise, but I was in and out of rehabs and detoxes and anemia and, you know, bruises all over me and, you know, drinking from morning until night. And not willing to say that I had a problem. It needed to be a choice. I kept having fun. I was having fun. I was addicted to this like party image. I had this idea, and I still sometimes, when nostalgia can come up and have this vision of me back in my party days. I conveniently bypass the really bad, not taking care of myself era to the party era. Like I just go right around it. My denial, like I said, is very flexible. I go right around that piece and go back to the part where I was like, ha ha ha, ha ha ha, traveling around wearing costumes. And I have this picture of myself with like, this is my mental picture of myself with my head tilted back, like drinking something with my pinky out and my back foot up. And I'm like laughing. Like this is the picture that I have of myself. And that was so seductive to me. And that's what I wanted. And that's what I held on to. But I forgot about all the mornings, like dry heaving in the mornings or sitting outside the liquor store waiting for it to open, trying to get change together and to make up an excuse to the person working there about why I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Like buying booze again. And I needed to keep this story up that I was fine, that I was choosing this, that I was having fun. I kept just telling myself that I was just doing it wrong. Like I was mixing the wrong things. You know, I shouldn't be doing cocaine with the booze, or I'm only going to drink after this certain time, or I'm not going to drink hard liquor. I'm only going to drink wine. Like all of these, you know, I was a strategist. I just needed to figure out a way to do it right. So it kept me from facing what was actually happening, what reality was, because I was stuck in this story of just fixing the issue, obsessed with this idea of being a normal drinker. And it almost killed me, like for real. And it's like this bubble was around me, like real viscous, and it's thick, like a thick bubble that I couldn't see out of, or I could only see what I was seeing. And other people would be trying to tell me this or this or this, but I can only see what I'm seeing. And sometimes that bubble, that layer of the bubble would get thinner, and it would be like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Like I remember pulling off this book one time. This is like when the veil gets thin, when you hear people talk about the veil gets thin, this is like my bubble of delusion gets thin. Like I remember being somewhere and this book, a used bookstore, and there was like light coming in this big window, and it was shining on this book, and the book said Drinking, a Love Story. And I picked it up and I read this memoir. And that was one of the first times that I admitted to myself that, oh fuck, I'm in trouble. Excellent memoir. And that was probably 7 years before I got sober. Somehow I conveniently took that knowledge and tucked it away and went back to that, I'm fine, I'm fine. In addiction especially, well, we do this in all the things though, is that we want to separate ourselves from the thing that we think is the issue. I thought that alcoholics looked like the old men in AA groups. I thought alcoholics looked like the people under the bridge, that I was too young to be, you know, all of these reasons, that we separate ourselves from what we think something is. But this bubble of delusion, and I speak to this with other people, sometimes the person who is in the bubble, and often people who are outside and they have a bubble person. How do I talk to my husband about his drinking? He doesn't think he has a problem. How do I speak to my daughter who says they're fine? So being a bubble person myself, having so many people, like with a very clear-cut case of facts about why I needed some support. It's like nothing was going to crack that. So what I tell them is like, you have to stay. You have to do what you can and leave when you need. And eventually that bubble gets thin. And at some point it'll be thin enough that something will get through. That's the hope. But you can't pop the bubble. You can't pop it. And I can only imagine how infuriating that is and how claustrophobic it is for the people with a person inside a bubble. I wasn't that person. I was safely guarded inside. But I mean, I do work with bubble people now. But I normally have them when their bubble is a little bit thinner, you know, not to this extreme. Now they're like ready and willing to work. Yeah. It's pretty amazing to reflect back about, and to just, that was so true to me. It was so true that everybody just needed to get off my back and I was fine. And I just needed to move, and I just needed to get a new job, and I just needed to get rid of this boyfriend, and everything was going to be fine. I didn't have a drinking problem. Yeah, so interesting. So interesting. 𝑐𝒏𝒍𝒊𝒏𝒆 says something to the theme of, if we can't tolerate what we know and what we feel, then one of our best options is to deny it, or is to disassociate from it. Like it's actually a mechanism that we use. So another way we can look at this is like with our cognitive biases. When we believe something and we are shown with contradiction to that, we often dig our heels into what we already believe. We're unwilling to see an opposing view. We can deny the truth of things. We see this in politics and our bigger culture, of not being willing to see something that doesn't correlate with the familiar. Something that feels too painful to look at. It's easier to stay where we are. Forms of denial, let's see. Staying in a relationship believing that an abuser will change. Lots of staying when we need to go. Sometimes that's difficult due to other reasons. But the denial piece is not in the staying when we need to go. It's the saying that it's fine. That's the denial piece of saying, no, this is fine. There's an awesome little meme. It's one of my favorites. It's this little cartoon dog. And he's sitting at a desk and the house is on fire. He's like in a kitchen and he's like drinking his coffee and he's like, this is fine. And it's like house is burning down. This is fine. This is fine. 𝑐𝒏𝒍𝒊𝒏𝒆 says something to the theme of, if we cannot tolerate what we feel and what we know, then best methods and mechanisms is to disassociate or to deny. So maybe we need to make more space to be able to deal with things that are challenging, to deal with things that are painful, rather than conveniently go around. Looking at through a Buddhist lens, this idea of impermanence is a really big teaching in the Buddhist lens of like impermanence. Things are changing. Everything is subject to change. Yet we grasp so tightly into this will stay the way that it is. Whether it's the way that our bodies are changing, or like think of all the multi-billion-dollar like anti-aging skincare things for women, or filters on TikTok and Instagram of this really denial of who we are, what we look like, our bodies, like some of these like really base things of like, this is who I am. We can cover and armor and filter is a form of denial. There's something called terror management theory. Very interesting. Ernest Becker started it from this book. He shares about it in his book called The Denial of Death from the 70s. Highly recommend it. Terror management is that thinking that whenever we became so self-aware, our prefrontal cortex grew. It's really great. We can do all these things. We can cooperate. We can create all these patterns and complex systems. Yet we also come with an awareness of our mortality when other animals that we know of don't know they're going to die. So we're faced with this. And how do we mitigate that? A lot of it is busyness. We can stay very, very busy. Here's another form of denial, workaholism. Not dealing with the feelings that are so challenging underneath the things that we can't control in our life, but we can control the emails. We can control the work. We can do what's going on with this. This I have some control over when life feels like I can't control it because it's always changing. My relationships may be sinking, but I can, excel at this thing, the productivity. I read yesterday, I'm reading this new book called Stealing Fire, and it said that one of the most Google searched things, now I would think it would be sex or something, but it's not. It's time. It was like 12 trillion searches versus like 2.7 trillion searches for sex. Time. How to get more of it. How to use it wisely. How to hack it. We need more time. We're constantly busy, 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 busy. But what does that busyness help us deny in the rest of our lives? There's so many different ways to look at this and so many different ways that it shows up. Yeah. My mother in this whole issue, challenge, debacle with me, she didn't know what to do. Helpless, claustrophobic, became a workaholic. She didn't know what to do with me. All they were doing at the end was waiting for a phone call that it was done, that I was done. Not that I was finished, that I had died. And what kept her, she could go and be busy at work. She became very consumed over there. It was a life raft for her. And denial is a life raft. It's something that is supporting us and saving us, but it should only be short term. So what kind of raft are you on that is helping us to, it is a raft. It is helping us. It is a solution. Denial is a solution, but it's not actually getting to the root of the issue. And actually, even drinking is a form of denial. Drinking in an addictive way, using it's a solution. It's also a life raft. It's denial of the feelings that are underneath that I'm not willing to feel. Drugs and alcohol are a solution to a problem of feeling uncomfortable. So they in themselves are a form of denial. And then we layer denial on top of it and say, this isn't a problem. I'm not hiding from anything. I'm having a good time. Look, I've got a wig on and a fur coat or whatever. So this is a very natural thing that we do. So just encourage you to think about it. What are ways in which you deny? Even procrastination, a subtle form of denial. Lots of different ways to look at this. So what do we do? What do we do with it? What happens when the only thing that you can see is what you can see, is what it feels like. You know, I can't see anything that I'm not seeing. Bringing it back to my personal story, in the end, this bubble, okay, I'm a person in a really thick bubble. Sometimes it got thinner. I would get scared. I might reach out for help, but then the bubble would get thick again. And I would be like, get away from me. I'm fine. So I did that dance for a really long time. And in the very end, my bubble got really thin, almost pierced for a moment. And I had an overdose, heroin overdose. And it dawned on me, I'm going to die. But people have been telling me this for a long time. But I was able to absorb it for a moment and look at the truth and say, this is not what I want. This is not what I did that started this for. And that was when that light shone in for just one moment, when the crack in the delusion happened and I had that brief moment to do something different. And that's also what I encourage to people who are dealing with somebody in a bubble, the bubble person, is that that veil does get thin. There are cracks, and to hopefully be available when that happens. And for yourself, if you are dealing with mitigating denial, because we do have varying degrees of understanding that we're in it and that we're not. You know, some are blind to us and others we know, is I encourage you to speak about it. And some things you will not be able to tell to many people, but find one person that you can be honest with. Because often when we get it out of our head, out of the stories that we create, this avoidance acrobat, and the, oh, but it's because of this, and oh, it's because of this, the rationalization, the justification, oh, he said he'd change, and da-da-da-da-da, all the different stories. Get it out of your head, speak it to someone. Another thing that can be really helpful is journaling. It's the same thing, is that you're getting it out of the head, because the thoughts can go in a zillion different ways at the same time. Journaling helps it slow it down. Speaking it helps it slow it down. And sometimes when it comes out, you're like, I'm so full of shit. Like, this is such a story. Those are some really helpful ways to do that. And to have people around you that love you, that are going to reflect back to you, that you can trust when you're in a story. Like, can you hear me out on this for a second and tell me if I'm losing it? Am I crazy at the moment? Because this is what I feel. Because feelings are not facts. Feelings are true, but they often are not accurate. So please touch in with people who love you and who can have a different perspective. That's a big one. Feelings are not facts, people. I have to remind myself that. Yeah. And be kind to yourself. Especially if this is a long-standing pattern, there's going to be a lot of work that comes around. It's kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off. So how can we be kind and compassionate as we do it? Because we also have that critical voice. I'm pretty sure you have it too. Staying kind, staying curious, and knowing that this is going to hurt. And it's worth it. All right, I'm going to stop. If you're interested in exploring this stuff in a group setting, Emerge is my recovery program. It's not just addiction. It's just really a humaning program. And it's so, we go deep and wide. It is incredible. And we get to show up in a container with other humans doing this human thing. And we get to reflect for one another. And it's powerful. It is definitely my heart's work. So All right. Ciao. Namaste.